It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and we are joined by Jason Bradbury, who is responsible. He did the footwork, excellent reporting here on, well, let's just say it, Steve Bannon's porn and meth house. Okay, Mr. Berry, are you there?
I am. I'm here.
Thank you so much.
And I'm not on meth, so here we go.
That makes two of us. Okay, great. We can only say the same for everyone. Now, tell us about yourself first. Who is Jason Bradbury?
So, I am a New Orleans-based, Louisiana-based independent investigative reporter. I started, the long and short of it is, I have a degree in journalism. For a long time, I was doing mostly promotional short documentary projects. Back in 2004, I got into did a long-term documentary along with my partner Vince Morelli on the New Orleans public school system, which at that time was the worst public school system in the country. And as we were telling that documentary, Katrina hit, and what happened is after we released the documentary, I was getting all of this information on corruption in the city, regarding FEMA funds and a lot of other areas in the state. So I just decided to start this whole blogging thing because it was new to me, and I didn't have an editor, and it seemed pretty liberating. 10 years later, 2017, I'm still at it, and I've uncovered numerous stories in New Orleans and my state. I'm kind of a hyper-local guy. This story that happened here with the Opechee house in Coconut Grove kind of fell into my lap last summer. So that's who I am, and that's how I ended up with the story.
Okay, and people can find you. You have a website, theamericanzombie.com. And when people and the story we're talking about today about Steve Bannon's porn and meth house, that's going to be found on shareblue.com. But just to make sure, it's Jason. That his middle name is Brad, and then the last name is Berry. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a confusion. There are two of us named There are two independent investigative reporters in New Orleans named Jason Berry, and I actually know him. Our paths have obviously crossed numerous times. So what I try to do to distinguish myself from the other Jason Berry writes a lot about the Catholic Church and pedophilia issues. I try to distinguish from him by using my middle name, Brad. So it's just a way to distinguish myself from him. He also writes for the Daily Beast, and I just don't like people to get confused with him because he ends up getting all my phone calls and I end up getting all his. So
yeah, one of you is getting bill collectors calling, so the other one doesn't owe money.
Right.
That's the last thing you need. Okay, now tell us about what's going on here with Steve Bannon, the lovely Steve Bannon. What'd you find out?
So the way the story fell into my lap is I was actually I wrote for about 2.5 years on the BP oil spill settlement, which was focused in my hometown of New Orleans. So there was a lot of corruption surrounding that, a lot of issues that I was covering, and in the course of that, I came across. I was also filming, and I met Lawrence Curtis, who is an underwater cinematographer that had come into town to document the effects of the oil spill on wildlife in the Gulf. So we became fast friends and started talking about some projects that we could possibly work together on, mainly about the pollution that the oil rigs are pumping out into the Gulf on an annual basis. We tried to get that off the ground. I never really got funding for that, but we just stayed friends, on social media and continued to talk to each other about issues that we were running into. About this time last year, actually in July of last year, he texted me during the middle of the election cycle and said, "You're not going to believe this, but I'm living in the house that Steve Bannon just moved out of last year." And I'm like, okay, so he starts telling me all of these things that are just detailed in the story, and I'm, my mind's kind of blown. Like, that's unbelievable. How could this guy who's of, this stature, running Breitbart, running a campaign for a president that may be president, how did he get to this point? or how did, why would he have done anything like this? So I kept digging the story, but the story was in Miami, obviously, and I'm in New Orleans. So, nobody was really interested in terms of publications. So I couldn't get a budget to go down there and tell it. And everybody thought Bannon would probably be yesterday's news by the time the election was over. Surprise, surprise, Trump wins the election, and Bannon is, not only named chief strategist, but then in January, but actually put on the National Security Council. Then everybody became interested.
Put himself on the National Security Council.
Yeah. So what happened is I talked with the Share Blue guys. They said, yes, we'll give you the budget to go down there and tell the story. And not only did they do that, they basically allowed me to go nomad as a reporter, which means, they had complete hands-off approach to allow me to tell the story I needed to tell. It took me about, 5 months to get this thing nailed down exactly. Met with Lawrence, talked with the owner of the house, talked with numerous people. And what you see is basically what I felt I could publish confidently. And the timing was actually not strategized, I swear. It was, the timing was just fortuitous, I guess, that it came out the day before he resigned. But, what you see there is a fraction of the story. And there are other mainstream entities that are working on the story now that I've spoken with and actually helped to try to progress the story. So I think that what you're seeing now is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, boy. Okay. Well, tell us, give us an idea of what you can say, because I understand what you're saying. You don't have the deep pockets to defend yourself against a big lawsuit, right? Because they'll drag you out and drain you dry, these people, especially someone like Bannon. But so what are you comfortable telling us that you found out inside the house going on there?
Well, see, the story, and I do have to be very careful about that in terms of defamation cases.
Yeah.
And, it's not my first rodeo, so I've been threatened numerous times, luckily never actually been sued for a defamation case. But what happened is the Washington Post this story originally broke in January. And, the bigger named entities went after it. The UK Guardian went after it, the Washington Post, the Miami Herald. And the Post wrote a story in March that kind of took this story right up to the point of where I picked it up. Okay. So, they were very careful not to say why the notorious bathtub was scorched. That they put that in their story, but they didn't speculate on why the bathtub would have been scorched. Why that there could have been drug use in the house. What they were doing was concentrating on whether or not Bannon was there.
Right.
And they came to the conclusion by talking to neighbors that he wasn't, that there was no proof that he was there. So that was a big issue at the time because there was a voter registration investigation into whether or not he had committed voter fraud, and that's a felony. So that investigation came out after the Post story, the results, and they said that it was inconclusive. But in that, they talked to both Diane Kohese, his ex-wife, and to another source who said, yeah, he was there. Absolutely, he lived there. And, there are other sources that I talked to during the course of the investigation that won't go on record. One very, very good source who said, I saw him there multiple times, but he would kind of come in under the cover of night on the weekend and then take off. So it was something that he didn't want people to know he was there, but he was coming and going from the house in the 2-year period. So he had to know to some extent what was going on in his house.
Well, and also too, the utilities and stuff were in his name too, and he was getting mail there, right?
Everything was in his name.
Right.
Yeah, everything was in his name. So, and on top of that, so basically, the house became such a problem in the neighborhood that they were basically run out of the neighborhood. And he then rented another house for her, in a adjacent neighborhood, on Opechee Drive in Coconut Grove. So it's, he had to have known why they were getting pushed out of the neighborhood. Right. And then he did it again. and rented another house. And that's in the Washington Post story. But what's not in the Post story is, what was actually going on in the house. So that was what I was trying to concentrate on. Basically, the story hit a logjam after the Washington Post story. And I wanted to just remove that logjam and start it rolling again, start the story rolling, and that's hopefully what it's going to do now. And the other mainstream media entities with the deep pockets and the major resources can chase this thing down, because I think it goes a lot deeper than what even I've reported.
That's very interesting. Now, what about? Let's get back to the bathtub. Now, when Lawrence Curtis moves in, they left the bathtub, and he moved into a home with a bathtub in that kind of condition.
He did. What they had done was what they'd done was, it's not just the bathtub. There were clear signs of that manufacturing had happened in the house. There were rings in the kitchen. They destroyed the kitchen floor, the tile on the kitchen floor. They destroyed the tile in the bathroom. The bathtub was the most notorious because that was in the Post story. And what they'd done was, instead of replacing the bathtub, the owner had painted over it when Lawrence first looked at it. So he didn't really notice, anything that bad. And then, he gets in, and it's pretty clear in the picture. It kind of looks like bathtub scum in the bottom, but that's actually a melted bathtub in the bottom, where an acid has been placed in it and eaten it away. So, and I saw it, firsthand. And as he got in, what had happened was, he moved in, and then he started to slowly realize, there were some really bad things that happened in this house. And the culmination of it was, and when I was there with him in March, and the owner admitted to both him and me that, she was probably cooking meth in this house, which upset him greatly, because he'd been, experiencing health problems.
Oh. Now, so the owner was the first then to see it in its worst condition. If it was that kind of condition, it was being re-rented, the owner seen it. You talked to the owner too, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay, and then what does he describe that you can talk about?
I think what he described was what was in what I would say is, he described what was in the story to both Lawrence and I. The story that he told was that, it was a normal, at first it was, he looked at the application for when Bannon subjected the rental application. Bannon had, listed like $50,000 in income a month, and he was a TV producer, and it's the dream client that you want. It's the dream tenant, because the guy's got plenty of money. So he was pretty happy about all this, and everything was fine at first, and then things slowly started changing with Diane in the house, and got weirder and weirder and more problematic, where the handyman that would show up, the guy that would show up to mow the lawn, they would yell at him, scream at him, tell him to get out. They started tinting the windows in the house. They put locks all over the house. They put video cameras all around the house. Neighbors started seeing things happening that were made them very uncomfortable. But I don't want to go into that, because I don't have any of those neighbors as sources.
All right.
Officially. The handyman, you saw what the handyman, stated in the story, the things they saw that were occurring. I think what's going to happen is there are two major other mainstream entities that are working on this story, and I know that one of them has gotten a lot further down the road than I ever did. So hopefully they're going to reveal a lot more of this as in the near future, in the next couple of weeks, hopefully to a month. So,
what was the rent on the house?
So I don't want to. This is not an accurate number, but I'm thinking it was around $2,500 to $2,700 a month.
Okay, so yeah, it's not like a tenement. You know what I mean? Like you turn over a house with
the house is on the market. The house, you can find it on Zillow right now. The house is on the market for sale for, I think, about $1.2 million.
Wow! And then they turn over a house like that with a tub like that in that kind of condition. Amazing. Now, What about, did you check and see if there were any 911 calls or visits to the home by the police?
There were, and that's already been reported. So, there was a major one, and that was the one that I think led to them getting kind of removed from the neighborhood or forced out, which was there was one of the, I think Diane's boyfriend at the time ran into, wait, let me back up. I don't know that, okay? Somebody that was involved at the house ran into a car of a neighbor up the street, and it was a hit-and-run incident, okay? I'm not sure who it was that did it, but that kind of caused a big ruckus in the neighborhood because, people had just had enough of, the constant partying and, the cars and everybody and everything that was happening at the house. So they, that's when they were forced to move out. But yeah, that 911 call is there, and that police report is there in Miami PD, and I think that's going to come out soon.
Oh, boy. Now, so Diane's boyfriend, so this is Steve Bannon's ex-wife, but they were married at the time, am I correct?
They just got divorced, yeah. It was his third wife that had just gotten divorced. So the whole thing is, it's so bizarre when you look at it from, the panoptic view. It's like, why is he renting a house for his ex-wife, and then, for 2 years, and then after she does all of this stuff, why would he rent another house for her? It's kind of a strange story. So the way the Washington Post story painted it was that he was trying to help her, with her health issues and with addiction issues. And I don't think that's what was happening. I think it was a different story. I think it was, he was renting it for her and then visiting her. And, what he was doing, I can't, I don't want to speculate on, but I think he certainly had to be aware of what was happening in that house.
Yeah, I've walked into houses like that. You can't miss it, Now, another thing, too, is, come on. I'm a private investigator. Now, the thing, too, is now Diane, her boyfriend, do we know his name? Is his name public?
Yeah, the problem is there wasn't just one boyfriend. One of the boyfriends ended up in jail, and I'm sorry, but I don't have his name right in front of me. It's in the Washington Post story.
Okay.
He was in jail, I believe, for drug distribution, and she actually ended up getting in trouble because she was smuggling drugs into him in the prison when he was in prison. She got caught doing that, and she ended up, I think, doing probation. I'm not sure if she actually went to jail for any period of time, but she was charged with felony there. And I think the Post talked to the guy in jail, but I don't think he's a credible source to talk to because he's he's somebody I think that may have asked for money to tell his story and stuff. So you can't you can't really quote those guys if they're looking for money to tell the story. So I'm not sure that he's a credible source anymore. And I don't think he was really that forthcoming, but the Post did talk to him, the Washington Post did.
Okay. And you describe Bannon's ex-wife having health and addiction issues. Are these public record or having addiction issues?
Well, that was in the Washington Post story. So the Washington Post interviewed her brother, who said that Steve was trying to help her overcome her addiction issues, and that's why he was renting the house, for her. So, that to me makes absolutely no sense. If you were trying to help someone, what are you going to do if you're trying to help someone get over addiction issues? You're going to put them in rehab. You're going to pay for them to go through. You're going to put them in a hospital in order to get over addiction issues. You don't pay for a house and allow them to do what they're doing for 2 years, and then, after 2 years of that, they get run out of the house, and then you rent another one. No, that doesn't make sense. But that's me speculating once again on what his motivations were, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Why did he not pay for her to be in rehab? That would have been much easier and cheaper.
Right.
Even.
Right. If he's paying $3,000 a month with utilities and it's all stuff's in his name and rent, why not? Was she working at all during this time?
So that's part what. Let's just say she was enterprising. I think, and while she was living in the house, the porn stories are I talked to people off the record about, there were definitely porns being shot there, and that's income. And Miami is along with LA, are probably the top two porn production areas in the country. So, there is money in that. There's money in the location fees for the house.
Right.
There's money in providing the talent. So, I think those things were going on. But in terms of an actual job, I'm not sure that she had one. She has a video production company that she was producing films with along, so was Bannon. They both had these, they made kind of propaganda films, hard right-wing propaganda films. And that's what I think her job was, she would have described it as a TV film producer.
Yeah, he has some very strange films. One with the Duck Dynasty guy, where he thinks he's a prophet. Have you seen that?
I heard about it. I have not seen it.
Yeah.
And believe me, I live in Louisiana, so I already know how strange the Duck Dynasty thing is.
Yeah.
But
the story gets better every 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
And how do we know about the porn?
Now,
what signs are there that there was porn going on at the house? How do we know that? From neighbors speaking, rumor? How do we know that?
Neighbors, and also they saw them filming. The handyman saw them filming it inside the house. And I can tell you that another one of the while they were trying to do work, they were filming them. So the one of the other mainstream media outlets that's working on this story has gone much further down that road and confirmed some things that I think will come out in their story. So
now, what about her video company? Is there a record, any kind of credits of them doing porn related type filming?
No, there's not, because I don't think that's what she was doing. I don't think she was producing these things. Well, no, she was producing. I don't think she was distributing any of it. So I think the way it works is I think, there are two or three major distributors in Miami, porn distributors. And I think what they do is basically, as a producer, they say, can you give us the house and the talent? And then we're going to come, we'll come shoot it. And that's it. So it's not really she wasn't distributing anything, but I think she was helping produce the stuff for other companies. That's what I think happened. Like I said, I think this other mainstream media entity has gone further down the road, and that will come. It'll be greater. The detail of what happened will be better when they release their story.
Yeah, if there's only 3 major porn guys in town, it's not that big a deal to contact them and get some, a hint of what's going on there.
Well, there's 3 major porn guys in town. It's like, but there's one major studio that specializes in it. As far as I can see, but that doesn't mean that there aren't smaller guys doing it too.
Right.
But the amount of money that I've heard she was making for each production, I don't think this was a small, fly-by-night company that was doing this. I think it had to be one of the major guys.
This is just I'm speechless. I'm not very often speechless. I got to tell you, man. This is just any other presidency, Clinton or Bush. Can you imagine Bush? Someone in the Bush White House, and they had this kind of craziness going on. Now, there was something in your article too about a drug test. Was some kind of drug test was performed inside porn? Some kind of drug test was performed inside the house. Now, how was that done? And why do we know about this?
Okay, so there were 2, and what happened is that after Carlos, Lawrence had been suffering from health issues ever since he'd been in the house. But it's like, when you read it, it's you kind of interpret it like, how did you not know this? But you have to put yourself in this position. You've got this really nice house that you were renting and paying a lot of money for. Okay,
yeah.
And this very lush Coconut Grove neighborhood, and you're experiencing these problems and you're hearing these stories, but you're not putting 2 and 2 together. And that's really what was happening with Lawrence. He's like, because Lawrence is he'll go off to the South Pacific and on a job and he'll be underwater for shooting for a couple months, 3 months, and then he would come back and to his house and hang out and he started experiencing these health problems, and he just wasn't putting it together. So when Carlos admitted that to him, it really angered him. It's like, this was happening. This is probably what has made me sick. And he was really angry about it. So we talked about what we should do, and he's like, well, let's run some tests, initial tests on it. So there's a company called AccuMeth, and I actually spoke to the owner of AccuMeth. Were the bathtub, the rings on the floor, where the buckets were, the buckets of acid. So it's those are those tests. He then hired another company to come in, independent company. They found traces of meth. They were I think they tested mostly the air ducts in the house, and they found traces of meth and then very high levels of cocaine. So, those are the tests that confirmed for us what was going on.
Okay, now the AccuMeth test, is that to determine the chemicals used to manufacture meth or the actual meth itself?
I don't want to misspeak on this because this is I talked to the owner of the company, and I definitely don't want to misspeak. You can go to the website, and it explains exactly how the test works. AccuMeth is the company, AccuMeth, and I don't want to misspeak on how it works. I'll let everybody do their own research there.
Okay, now when Mr. Lawrence Curtis was living there at the house, did any strange people show up looking for the previous tenants?
Yeah, that was in the story too. So, I mean, it wasn't just the one that he listed. There were other things that happened that, but this one was the most glaring because, a woman showed up knocking on the door and wanted to speak, said she was, as Lawrence said, she was pretty clear she was tweaked out on something. And he was scared of her, and she said, is Diane or Steve here?
Wow. And
he said, no, they don't live here anymore. And she, kind of stood there for a few moments in a daze. He said, lady, they don't live here anymore. Please leave. And, she walked away, but she looked pretty distraught, and, there was something going on there. But there were other encounters like that with people knocking on the door asking for Diane or Steve. So that was just the one that that was the most egregious, I guess. So that was why I was in the story.
And what about strange mail? Any kind of odd mail?
Well, obviously.
I never get a no out of you. I never get a no out of you. It's changed everything.
Yeah, well, no, there's stuff that we didn't put in the story, regarding the mail that was, there were some crazy kind of sex toy catalogs that were sent in Steve's name to Steve Bannon at the address. That obviously you can't open mail. You have, and that's illegal. So he was returning everything. There were a number of letters from the Bank of Ireland. Diane herself showed up at the house, pretty desperate, and at that time it was Lawrence and his girlfriend that answered the door, and she was very desperate to get some mail, and she said a credit card from I think the Bank of Ireland, and there were a lot of mail. There was a lot of mail from the Bank of Ireland, but he said, "Look, I've returned everything. It's like I'm sending it all back. So anything that I don't, he did have some there that there was so much coming in. He eventually, towed the mail. It started handing it back to the postal lady, but he did have some there that he returned to her. But that was the only time he actually had direct contact with Diane, where she was looking for what she said was a credit card. So."
Oh, boy. Now, the sex toy catalog, whose name was on that, Diane or Steve?
Steve's name was on it.
Okay, and what kind of sex toys? Give me an idea. Might as well get into it. What kind of sex toys?
It was really weird. It was like a Latin-based company. It was so bizarre. I don't even know how to describe it. It was a lot of like prosthetic enhancements, like fake butts, and then there were sexual toys and like I can't even describe it. It was so weird on the cover of it. Obviously it was open. It wasn't sealed or anything.
Right.
It was just a catalog that came in the mail. So nobody opened it or anything. But it was there on the counter, and it was a bizarre catalog, man. I don't know what to say.
Did you take a picture of it?
I may have, but it's not in the story, so it's not in the story.
Okay, all right, but you describe it as a catalog from Latin America. I'm assuming you mean, right? Latin America, right?
No, I'm not saying it's from Latin America. It could have been from Miami, but it's like Miami's a heavily Latin-speaking
Spanish,
area,
yes.
And so that could have been where I didn't really examine it that hard. It was very weird, bizarre, and I just kind of went on about I was trying to get the story that I knew I could tell. So, a catalog like that is not really a story.
I think it's my story today. I gotta say that. I think that's I think we got a headline here. Jason, I tell you, man, I love you. This is great stuff. This is a Jason Brad is his middle name. Jason Brad Berry. Fascinating information here. His website is theamericanzombie.com. And this article he just wrote here with fascinating stuff is on shareblue.com, and it's called Steve Bannon's Porn and Meth House. Now, do you believe that it's possible that the article coming out on the day that it did, because it was on MSNBC. They showed it. They flashed the title of it. They didn't really get into too much detail. Do you think it had anything to do with Bannon quitting on that day, that they announced it that day that, hey, that's it, he got to go?
I would love to put that notch in my belt, but
sure.
I can't say that that's the case. I think that he knows that. There's so many weird things that have happened in this story since March. That are going on down there around that house in Miami. I think there's no doubt that he knows that these bigger entities, I don't think he was worried about me in any way, but I think there's no doubt that he knows that these entities are looking at it. On a separate note, let me just say this from this story. I think there's a big problem with human trafficking in Miami. Okay. And actually in the United States. And hopefully that, if anything good comes of stories like this or any type of investigation, would be that it raises people's awareness to the human trafficking problem we have, because this is a problem that we can solve. It's not a problem, it's not like global warming where it's very complicated and, we have to change there's things that we're just beyond our control. This is a problem that we can actually address. And I think Miami is a good place to start. So, hopefully, this time next year, this is what we're going to be talking about. It's going to raise awareness, people's awareness, and we can actually make a difference.
Oh, man, God bless you. That would be wonderful, because we do a lot of shows about human trafficking here, and Jeffrey Epstein, and all that. I just did a show yesterday down there in Florida with Jose Lambert from the Gossip Extra website, private investigator down there. We just did a whole show about all that stuff. That would, man, God bless you, man. That would be great. And anything you got coming up you want to talk about on the air, you can come on here anytime you want. Anybody got a catalog with sex toys with Steve Bannon's name on it, you got a free... Okay, you got free reign to come on this show, brother. Okay. Now, do you think Bannon okay. Come on, anytime you want. Whatever you want to tell me. Promote anything. Yeah. Steve Bannon, you think he knows, has he tried to contact you?
No. I tried to contact Diane. Diane's, I couldn't reach her, nor could any other reporter reach her. all the contact information I had was turned up dead. So I'm not even sure where she is right now. She's originally from Ireland, so she's from Limerick, Ireland, and she may be in Ireland. I don't know. She may still be in Miami. I think she's still on probation, so I doubt she would be out of the country unless there was some special probation. But obviously, if one of those media resources can get to Diane and she talks, that would explain everything about what went down. But yeah, so what am I working on now? I'm back to the grind in my little hometown of New Orleans and Louisiana. And I'm focusing on a neighboring parish in New Orleans that is, I think, probably the greatest American story never told. So, more corruption, more sex, more drugs, murder, and all of that good stuff. And that's what I'll be working on over the next year.
Let me know when you want to talk about that. Now, you don't sound like you're from New Orleans, though. You're a transplant?
Originally, I'm originally from Kentucky, and I left Kentucky when I was 18, though. So I went to school at the University of Mississippi, and I lived in Washington, D.C. for a little while. But New Orleans is my home. I adored that city, and I'm planning on dying there. So hopefully later, not sooner.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an endless wealth of storytelling, obviously, especially when it comes to corruption. We kind of wrote the book on Louisiana and New Orleans did on government corruption. So it's fertile ground, and I don't plan on going anywhere. And I really like telling my local stories to the people that I live around. But every once in a while, a story will come along, and it has national implications like this. And if I can get it, I'm going to get it. So that's what I'm up to.
No, great work, man. Great work. I can't thank you enough. Jason Brad Berry, and it's not Bradbury. It's Brad is his middle name. Jason Brad, and then Berry, Berry. TheAmericanZombie.com.
And I'm not trying to be pretentious and use three names or anything. It's just that I'm just trying to separate myself from the other reporter. So that's all.
Yeah, well, maybe you don't want to, if any libel suits come down, maybe you don't want to separate your name. You want a little confusion here,
Right.
But it seems like you got the goods here 100% correctly. You're very careful. I'm very impressed with your work, man. I can't thank you enough for coming on so quickly, too. Just contacted you yesterday. Jason, keep in touch, okay, man?
Okay, Ed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, then we had Jason Berry, but he uses a Jason Bradbury so to avoid confusion. Sharedblue.com, and his website is theamericanzombie.com. I'm going to be talking to Lawrence Curtis. I got his information, who's the actual renter of the home there. We have his contact information. We've been in touch with him. They want to do a show with us. The breaking story, I think, today that I'm going to put a press release about is that there were sex toy magazines in the mail, catalogs, in the name of Steve Bannon with fake butts. What was I should ask if those are male butts or female butts, man. But maybe I'll send our friend Jason Berry there an email. And very interesting that Jason is also concerned with human trafficking and how he would bring that up in connection to this story here. So let's see what's coming up there around the corner. Better get off my lazy easy chair here and get to work on this before the story really blows up and I miss my my little in here. So thank you so much. Enjoy the show. Good night.